To this live read of Awaken the Giant Within. More than 1 million copies sold. This is a Tony Robbins book about how to take immediate control of your emotional, physical, and financial destiny. And I think this is a great book. I've read it before and I've read his other books. So, obviously I am, very supportive of the stuff that he talks about. I found it very helpful, and it is a national bestseller. Pretty thick book, quite a lot of pages, a lot of ideas and thoughts. But how can you really inspire someone? How can you motivate someone? How can you give someone the tools that they need to take immediate control of their emotional, physical, and financial destiny if you don't put it into a large format? If this was just like a little pamphlet, you literally wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't get much value out of it. And quite frankly, in my opinion, I think Tony Robbins, if you ever have a chance to go to his event, he's one of the people that is an absolute must see in your lifetime. So, with that said, we wrapped up the last video. We wrapped up the last video with a quote, and the quote was, "The belief that becomes truth for me is that which allows me the best use of my strength, the best means of putting my virtues into action." Andre Gide. And I thought that was a great quote. It's what I interpret it as is this idea that the thing that you should turn into a belief, a system of ways of thinking that guide your life. Your beliefs guide your life. What you believe, whether you believe in a religion, whether you don't believe in a religion, but you believe in or economics or whatever your beliefs are, those are ultimately going to mold your actions. They're going to change how you go through life. So I thought that was a very powerful quote that really sums up the idea of a valuable way to live. And I'm not, trying to define the way people should live, but this is just one example of how it's important to manage your beliefs, to choose which beliefs you want to go with, and to pick the beliefs that are going to allow you the best use of your strength and the best means of putting your virtues, your strengths, your values into action. So with that, we're going to go ahead and continue on with this book here. Let's go on to the next section. People so often develop limiting beliefs about who they are and what they're capable of. Because they haven't succeeded in the past, they believe that they won't be able to succeed in the future. As a result, out of their fear of pain, they begin to constantly focus on being realistic. Most people who constantly say, "Let's be realistic," are really just living in fear, deathly afraid of being disappointed again. Out of that fear, they develop beliefs that cause them to hesitate, to not give their all. Consequently, they get limited results. Great leaders are rarely realistic. They are intelligent and they are accurate, but they are not realistic by other people's standards. Okay, this is a very powerful chapter right here, just talking about this idea of what's realistic. I'm gonna have to circle this word. Realistic, what is realistic? Whose reality? What is realistic for one person, though, is totally different from what is realistic for another person, based upon their references. Gandhi believed he could gain autonomy for India without violently opposing Great Britain, something that had never been done before. And I asked somebody the other day, this is separate from the book, I'll go back in and out of it, but I asked somebody the other day, I'm pretty ignorant about, or I was ignorant about how, Britain and India's relationship. And I had to ask them, I was like, oh, well, so how long did Britain colonize India? And they said for hundreds of years. I thought it might have been, for maybe a few decades, maybe 100 years, but it was hundreds, for a long, long time. It's really interesting to think that to have had that for so long, that one person was like, hey, we're going to make this change. And he was able to transform an entire world, the entire world just from that one movement. Yes, it affected India. Yes, it affected their people, changed, British colonialism and changed Indian life. But there were so many people that were inspired by him around the entire world and for generations to come and for generations in the future that are to come. He changed a lot of people. So he's had a huge impact back then, today, and into the future. He wasn't being realistic. Back to the book. He wasn't being realistic, but he certainly proved to be accurate. By the same token, it certainly wasn't realistic for a man to believe he could give the world happiness by building a theme park in the middle of an orange grove and charging people not only for rides, but even to get in. At the time, there was no such park in the world, yet Walt Disney had a sense of certainty like few people who have ever lived, and his optimism transformed his circumstances. If you're going to make an error in life, err on the side of overestimating your capabilities. Obviously, as long as it doesn't jeopardize your life. By the way, this is something that's hard to do since human capacity is so much greater than most of us would ever dream. In fact, many studies have focused on the differences between people who are depressed and people who are extremely optimistic. After attempting to learn a new skill, the pessimists are always more accurate about how they did, while the optimists see their behavior as being more effective than it actually was. Yet, this unrealistic valuation of their own performance is the secret of their future success. Invariably, the optimists eventually end up mastering the skill, while pessimists fail. Why? Optimists are those who, despite having no references for success or even references of failure, manage to ignore those references, leaving unassembled such cognitive tabletops as "I failed" or "I can't succeed." Instead, optimists produce faith references, summoning forth their imagination to picture themselves doing something different the next time and succeeding. It is this special ability, this unique focus, which allows them to persist until eventually they gain the distinctions that put them over the top. The reason success eludes most people is that they have insufficient references of succeeding in the past. But an optimist operates with beliefs such as the past doesn't equal the future. All great leaders, all people who have achieved success in any area of life know the power of continuously pursuing their vision, even if all the details of how to achieve it aren't available. If you develop the absolute sense of certainty that powerful beliefs provide, then you can get yourself to accomplish virtually anything, including those things that other people are certain are impossible. That is a powerful idea here. The past doesn't equal the future. That's a powerful belief, and just reflecting on this idea of how optimists operate. I think it is really interesting to consider this concept that those who are learning new skills, that an optimist, they're going to be accurate, or pessimists are going to be accurate, and optimists are going to feel like they're more effective. But at some level, some people might call it like cockiness when people think that what they're doing is way more effective or better than what they actually do or what they actually produce. But it is interesting to think that how that little change in thinking, as long as it doesn't hurt you, as long as it doesn't cause you injury, right? So if you're a terrible NASCAR driver, or if you're a terrible driver, or if you're a terrible skydiver, or if you're a terrible bicyclist, don't go overestimating your ability to take on danger. But if you're going to overestimate your capabilities, especially on day-to-day skills that don't put anyone in danger, don't put yourself in danger, don't put, I think there's a good example here that there's a lot of teenagers who start to drive. let's say you were to hire somebody for an Uber. Who would you want to drive you around? Someone who just got their license and is fairly new to driving around in your city, or someone who's put in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 miles in your area and has dealt with the roads, the bad drivers, and all that, right? The example is pretty obvious. So, but what you find is that how many students do you know who just get their license, who finally get a fast car that they've been dreaming of, and suddenly, they're on the road speeding and they don't know the area, and, kids getting into accidents. It's sad. It can be heartbreaking. But definitely teenagers can become overconfident in their driving skills. But with that said, will those teenagers who want to continuously become better drivers, will they improve? Yes, potentially those optimists, those people that overestimate their abilities can, so long as, they're able to do it in a way that doesn't affect others in a negative way. But, you have to develop this sense of certainty that having this powerful belief in yourself and your skills provides, right? So we just got an example of where we can find a dangerous situation to overestimate your skills, but on most other things where you can use improved skills, there's plenty of room to overestimate your ability, whether that be in math on a day-to-day basis, overestimating your ability to capture trends to make videos on, or to capture trends to bet, and I say bet, but to trade stocks and things on, or your ability to your body's ability, overestimating your body's ability to adapt to new stressors for fitness. Those are some examples where overestimating your ability can be very helpful. Like if you're very confident in your ability to improve your fitness, improve your physical ability in sports and activities, you're going to be that much better, and you're probably going to continue on in improving in those areas. So that's really what some reflecting on this book is, some ideas I'm taking away. So here's a quote: "Only in men's imagination does every truth find an effective and undeniable existence." Imagination, not invention, is the supreme master of art as of life. So let's think about what this quote means. I gotta look. Only in men's imagination does every truth find an effective and undeniable existence. Okay, so only in our minds does truth, or only in our imagination can truth make itself exist. Imagination, not invention, is the supreme master of art as of life. So only in men's imagination does every truth find an effective and undeniable existence. Only in men's imagination. So truth, you can plant, this is just my interpretation, so if you have a different interpretation, that's great, but only in our imagination, so we can create truth, and our truths can be almost undeniable and incredibly effective. But that is why imagination is the supreme master of art and life. Wow, that's powerful. That's great. Use your imaginations wisely. These quotes are amazing. By Joseph Conrad, that quote. "One of the biggest challenges in anyone's life is knowing how to interpret failures. How we deal with life's defeats and what we determine is the cause will shape our destinies. We need to remember that how we deal with adversity and challenges will shape our lives more than almost anything else. Sometimes we get so many references of pain and failure that we begin to assemble those into a belief that nothing we do can make things better. Some people begin to feel that things are pointless, that they're helpless or worthless, or that no matter what they try, they'll lose anyway. These are a set of beliefs that must never be indulged in if we ever expect to succeed and achieve in our lives. These beliefs strip us of our personal power and destroy our ability to act. In psychology, there's a name for this destructive mindset: learned helplessness. When people experience enough failure at something, and you'd be surprised how few times this is for some people, they perceive their efforts as futile and develop the terminal discouragement of learned helplessness. That's really interesting right there. And there's a photo. Encumbered with a low self-image, Bob takes a job as a speed bump. Oh my goodness, here's an interesting photo, a cartoon, if you will. But let's reflect on that for a second. There's two big ideas that I took away from this. Two really big ideas is that people who fail at things, let's see, they're helpless or they feel helpless or worthless. Alright, so when you get enough references of fear or pain or failure, you're going to start to learn that when you try these things or these acts, that you can start to get learned helplessness. And then when you learn enough about that, you can start to feel helpless. But I think the biggest idea is that the most people, you'd be surprised at how few times this is for some people. Like how many times people fail and become discouraged so quickly. And I think that's really interesting, because I've definitely given up on things that I felt were very, or not futile, but just overly challenging. I failed and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that again or something. And it just makes me wonder, like, how many people try something, don't succeed the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 100th time, and they give up. And maybe 100 times is too many. Like, if you've created 100 businesses and you've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in each business, there's probably something wrong, and you've used up way too many resources. But at the end of the day, or maybe you've used up just enough resources until you can figure out how to nail it perfectly. But imagine if Thomas Edison gave up on the 20th light bulb. I think he did something like 10,000 light bulb iterations. So continuing on in the book, Dr. Martin Seligman of the University of Pennsylvania has done intensive research on what creates learned helplessness. In this book, Learned Optimism, he reports on 3 specific patterns of beliefs that cause us to feel helpless and can destroy virtually every aspect of our lives. He calls these 3 categories permanence, pervasiveness, and personal. So probably another worthwhile read right there, Learned Optimism, Dr. Martin Seligman. So patterns of beliefs: permanence, pervasiveness, and personal. Many of our country's greatest achievers have succeeded in spite of running into huge problems and barriers. The difference between them and those who give up revolves around their beliefs about the permanence or lack thereof of their problems. Achievers rarely, if ever, see a problem as permanent, while those who fail see even the smallest problems as permanent. Once you adopt the belief that there's nothing you can do to change something, simply because nothing you've done up until now has changed it, you start to take a pernicious poison into your system. 8 years ago, when I had hit rock bottom and despaired of ever turning the things around, I thought my problems were permanent. That was the closest thing to emotional death I've ever experienced. I learned to link so much pain to holding that belief that I was able to destroy it, and I've never indulged in it again. You must do the same. If you ever hear yourself or anyone you care about starting to express the belief that a problem is permanent, it's time to immediately shake that person loose. No matter what happens in your life, you've got to be able to believe this too shall pass, and that if you keep persisting, you'll find a way. The second difference between winners and losers. So here we go. These are examples of permanence. So this is permanence right here. That was an example of permanence. The second difference between winners and losers. those who are optimistic and those who are pessimistic is their beliefs about the pervasiveness of problems. An achiever never sees a problem as being pervasive, that is, that one problem controls their whole life. They always see it as, well, it's just a challenge with my eating pattern. They don't see it as, I'm the problem, because I overeat, my whole life is destroyed. Conversely, those who are pessimistic, those who have learned helplessness, have developed a belief that because they screwed up in one area, they are a screw up. They believe that because they have financial challenge, their whole life is now destroyed. Their kids won't be taken care of. Their spouses will leave them, and so on. Pretty soon, they generalize that things are out of control and feel completely helpless. Pretty soon, imagine the impact of permanence and pervasiveness together. The solution to both permanence and pervasiveness is to see something you can take control of in your life and begin to take action in that direction. As you do this, some of these limiting beliefs will disappear. So pervasiveness. So that's really a really big thing that you can often hear in people's lives. Like, oh, well, I'm not successful in this one area, or I failed in this area, so I can't succeed in any other area. You know, there are probably people out there who feel that because they're not financially successful, that they can't have all of the other great things. They might feel that because they don't have the personality or the looks, that from that stems all of their challenges and their failures in life, and that or that something happens for a quick period of time, like getting fired from work, or getting kicked off a sports team, or having someone leave you in a relationship, and to combine that and start to feel like that's permanent, and because that happened that you can't move on and do something better with your life. I think those are great examples of permanence and pervasiveness. There's a lot of things that I personally can come up with. I've definitely felt at times when I've left the company or been fired at work, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I don't know how I'll ever get out of this. And maybe, I don't let it be pervasive. I realize that it's not permanent. Those are very helpful things to me. But I could have very easily let certain things feel permanent, feel pervasive, and just let it screw up my entire life. But I have not. I think at some level we have heard of these ideas, but we haven't been able to define them in an easy way. So permanence, pervasiveness, and now we're going to move on to the next one in the book. The final category of belief, which Seligman calls personal, I refer to as the problem being personal. If we don't see a failure as a challenge to modify our approach, but rather as a problem with ourselves, as a personality defect, we will immediately feel overwhelmed. After all, how do you change your entire life? Isn't that more difficult than just changing your actions in a particular area? Be wary of adopting the belief of the problem being personal. How inspired can you get by beating yourself up? So this section is about personal. Wow. To modify our approach. So that's really interesting, because a lot of us can have a problem. Let's say that we're having a problem being motivated to go to the gym, or I've had a problem being motivated to run, or I've had a problem sticking to a clean or healthy diet. Or we might think, I have a problem with this, or I have a problem with that, which affects our home, or the way that we, something as simple as clean dishes, or I have a problem such as I'm impatient, so I can't be good with, my children, or I don't have the patience to do this, or, and at some level, right, there's our personalities attached to that, I think, but to consider that being a personal problem rather than something that we can change, that we can modify, Not necessarily a personality themselves, right? As the older you get, the harder it is to change your personality, and that's true. So you gotta, either find the tools to do that and work really hard at it, or you gotta nip the nip it in the bud, as they say, to cut it at the start way as soon as you start noticing at a young age. So isn't that more difficult than just changing your actions? So how can you, rather than assuming it's a personality defect, how do you modify your approach? How do you change the way you approach it? So here's an example, like if you feel that you're an impatient person or a constantly angry person, rather than seeing your personality as a defect, recognizing those moments that you have those challenges where it becomes bad, like you can't be angry at work all the time, you can't be impatient with certain people that you want a good relationship with. So how can you change your actions in those areas to improve rather than seeing it as a personality defect? So good to reflect on that idea. So permanence, pervasiveness, and personal. And those are the patterns of beliefs that you can aim to avoid or improve upon, as if you want to make some positive changes. So holding these limiting beliefs is equivalent to systematically ingesting minute doses of arsenic that over time build up to a fatal dose. While we don't die immediately, we start dying emotionally the moment we partake of them. So we have to avoid them at all costs. Remember, as long as you believe something, your brain operates on automatic pilot, filtering any input from the environment and searching for references to validate your belief regardless of what it is. So here's a quote. "It is the mind that maketh good of ill, that maketh wretch or happy, rich or poor." Edmund Spencer. So this is a great quote, and it's a good time to pause because we're about to move into a different part of the chapter, but just reflecting, like, what are the things on our mind, not just my mind, but our mind, yours, mine, people in general. What are the things that dominate our mind, the thoughts, the ideas, our perceptions, not just about ourselves, but about other people, life, our relationships, work, skills? What are the things that we're using in our mind, that we're taking in as references, and how are we interpreting those references? It's important to build strong references, and if you constantly have negative references, then you're going to be moving in a certain direction, and if that's affecting you negatively, you don't want that. Then what are the references you can start building to push yourself in a positive direction? So here we go. How to change a belief. All personal breakthroughs begin with a change in beliefs. So how do we change? The most effective way is to get your brain to associate massive pain to the old belief. You must feel deep in your gut that not only has this belief cost you pain in the past, but it's costing you in the present and ultimately can only bring you pain in the future. Then you must associate tremendous pleasure to the idea of adopting a new empowering belief. This is the basic pattern that we'll review again and again in creating change in our lives. Remember, we can never forget that everything we do either out of our need to avoid pain or our desire to gain pleasure. And if we associate enough pain to anything, we'll change. Wow, all right. The only reason we have a belief about something is that we've linked massive pain to not believing it, or massive pleasure to keeping it alive. Secondly, create doubt. If you're really honest with yourself, aren't there some beliefs that you used to defend heart and soul years ago that you'd be almost embarrassed to admit today? What happened? Something caused you to doubt. maybe a new experience, maybe a counterexample to your past belief. Perhaps you met some Russians and found out that they were people just like you, not part of some evil empire. I think that many Americans today feel a genuine compassion for Soviet citizens because they see them as people who are struggling to take care of their families. Part of what changed our perceptions was exchange programs in which we actually met Russians and saw how much they share in common with us. We got new experiences which caused us to question, interrupted our patterns of certainty, and began to shake our reference legs. However, new experience in and of itself doesn't guarantee a change in belief. People can have an experience that runs directly counter to their belief, yet interpret it in any way they want in order to bolster their conviction. Saddam Hussein demonstrated this during the Persian Gulf War, insisting that he was winning despite the destruction that surrounded him. On a personal level, a woman at one of my seminars started to experience some rather unique mental and emotional states, claiming that I was a Nazi and was poisoning the people in the room with invisible gases flowing through the air conditioning vents. As I tried to calm her down by slowing my speech patterns, a standard approach in causing someone to relax, she pointed out, "See, it's already beginning to slur your speech." No matter what happened, she managed to use it to back up her conviction that we were all being poisoned. Eventually, I was able to break her pattern. How do you do that? We'll talk about that in the next chapter. Oh my goodness. That's one thing that you got to give Tony Robbins credit for, is he's got so many examples of these people that just started like flipping out in his seminars, because he works with people who want therapy or have worked with therapists or need therapy, and suddenly they're freaking out. And if you've ever had an anxious breakdown or anxiety attack or something, like, things can happen. Or if you've ever been in a room with just like 500 people, you think that out of those 500 people, there's at least a couple people who could just flip out for whatever reason. It's a challenge. But here's a good thing to look at. So the two ways to change a belief, or two big steps, is pain plus doubt. So if you want to change your belief, you have to get pain from that belief, or you have to get doubt about it. And that's not always easy. Like, again, how do you know what beliefs you want to change? Sometimes beliefs are good, and I'm not saying, and I doubt this book is saying, that you need to change good beliefs, but if there's a belief that is holding you back, that's preventing you from progress forward, such as, oh, well, all of this is BS and nonsense, right? If you're listening to this and you're saying that all of this is garbage, then that might be a belief that's worth changing. How do you get pain? If you want to change that, how do you associate pain with that belief? Well, someone else who adopts this philosophy, these belief systems, is going to progress faster than you, maybe your enemy. And how do you create doubt? Well, why not try something? Why not try an idea yourself and go with it? So let's go ahead and continue on in this book. New experiences trigger change only if they cause us to question our beliefs. Remember, whenever we believe something, we no longer question it in any way. Can you imagine living a life where you don't question your beliefs? But I guess that's the definition of a belief, so who knows? The moment we begin to honestly question our beliefs, we no longer feel absolutely certain about them. We are beginning to shake the reference legs of our cognitive tables, and as a result start to lose our feeling of absolute certainty. Have you ever doubted your ability to do something? How did you do it? You probably ask yourself some poor questions like, what if I screw up? What if it doesn't work out? What if they don't like me? But questions can obviously be tremendously empowering if we use them to examine the validity of beliefs we may have just blindly accepted. It's a This is, in case you're wondering, Trader Joe's sparkling black tea with peach juice. It's pretty good. It is sparkling, and it's a small can. Let's see how much caffeine is in it. Once can is open, keep refrigerated, consume within 1 day. It's pasteurized. Black tea, peach juice, carbon dioxide, citric acid, ascorbic acid, and 3 grams of carbs. Not bad, only 15 calories. Perfectly peachy, ultra fizzy. Doesn't say how much caffeine, but I'm gonna guess it's probably something like, I don't know, 80 milligrams. Okay. What if I screw up? But questions can obviously be tremendous empowering if we use them to examine the validity of our beliefs. Beliefs we may have just blindly accepted. In fact, many of our beliefs are supported by information we've received from others that we failed to question at the time. If we scrutinize them, we may find that what we've unconsciously believed for years may be based on a false set of presuppositions. If you use a typewriter or computer, I'm sure you'll appreciate this example. Why do you think the traditional arrangement of letters, numbers, and symbols on 99% of all typing devices is universally accepted around the world? By the way, that arrangement of characters is known as QWERTY. QWERTY. If you type, you know that these are the characters on the top left row of your keyboard. Obviously, this arrangement was devised as the most efficient configuration to bolster typing speed, right? Most people never question it. After all, QWERTY has existed for 120 years. But in fact, QWERTY is about the most inefficient configuration you can imagine. Many programs, such as the Dvorak Simplified Keyboard, have been proven to cut errors and increase speed radically. The truth is, QWERTY was deliberately designed to slow down the human typist at a time when typewriter parts moved so slowly that they would jam if the operator typed too fast. Why have we clung to the QWERTY keyboard for 120 years? In 1882, when almost everyone typed with the hunt and peck method, a woman who had developed the 8-finger typing method was challenged to typing contest by another teacher. To represent her, she hired a professional typist, a man who had memorized the QWERTY keyboard. With the advantage of memorization and the 8-finger method, he was able to beat his competitor who used the 4-finger hunt and peck method on a different keyboard. So from then on, QWERTY became the standard for speed, and no one even questioned the reference anymore to see how valid it was. How many other beliefs do you have in daily life about who you are, or what you can or cannot do, or how people should act, or what capabilities your kids have that are failing to question? Also, disempowering beliefs you've begun to accept that limit your life and you're not even aware of it? Those are some big things to question. Like even something as simple as how you type. And I think it's interesting because today we're even moving away from keyboards. Most people like type so many things on their phone, or they like hire an AI to type. You know, there's some grown adults who are terrible typers. Even if their job's dependent on it, they have an assistant do it. And it's interesting to think that there's a faster way to do things. But I also wonder if, even though it might be a faster way, how many keyboards? Is there an affordable keyboard? Who wants to make the change? So maybe is there a way to make that change? Share some of your ideas. If you question anything enough, eventually you'll begin to doubt it. This includes things that you absolutely believe beyond a shadow of a doubt. Years ago, I had the unique opportunity to work with the U.S. Army, working with the U.S. Army, with whom I negotiated a contract to reduce certain training times for specialized areas. My work was so successful that I also went through top secret clearance and had a chance to model one of the top officials in the CIA. A man who worked his way up from the bottom of the organization. Let me tell you that the skills that he had and others like him have developed for shaking another person's convictions and changing their beliefs are absolutely astounding. They create an environment that causes people to doubt what they've always believed. and then give them new ideas and experiences to support the adoption of new beliefs. Watching the speed at which they can change someone's belief is almost scary, yet it's powerfully fascinating. I've learned to use these techniques on myself to be able to eliminate my disempowering beliefs and replace them with empowering ones. Holy crap. So I don't know if we're actually about to learn the skills of the CIA to change someone's beliefs, but definitely can be very powerful to help it change your own. My goodness. Just imagine, like, the training that the CIA has. They have scientists, researchers. They have the most up-to-date research and information in the world, and these CIA agents actually get to put it into action on a day-to-day basis. That's pretty wild. So I don't know if it doesn't say whether he's going to teach us those specific skills, but I'm sure there's books out about it by now. So can you imagine, like, just being in a situation where someone's ultimate purpose, the CIA, has to change your beliefs? Like, you'd like to think that some people will fight hand and foot, nail and whatever, but at some level, like, even without pain, I hear that a lot of research nowadays says that pain is the worst way to get someone to change what they believe. But to truly get someone to change, and how that can affect people to change their negative beliefs into empowering positive beliefs. Continuing on with the book. Our beliefs have different levels of emotional certainty and intensity, and it's important to know just how intense they really are. In fact, I've classified beliefs into 3 categories: opinions, beliefs, and convictions. So 3 categories of beliefs: opinions, beliefs, and convictions. Oh, that's pretty good. So there's 3 tiers. I might say 3 tiers of them: opinions, beliefs, and convictions. An opinion is something we feel relatively certain about. You know, that might be interesting, by the way. Just got to take a note here. Are there any books? Hopefully Tony Robbins shares these, but what are the techniques that you can use to eliminate disempowering beliefs? An opinion is something we feel relatively certain about, but the certainty is only temporary because it can be changed easily. Our cognitive tabletop is supported by wobbly, unverified reference legs that may be based on impressions. For example, many people originally perceived George Bush as a wimp, based solely on his tone of voice. But when they saw how he was able to galvanize support from leaders around the world and effectively deal with Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, there was a clear shift in the public opinion polls. Bush soared to one of the highest levels of public popularity of any president in modern history. But by the time you read this paragraph, this cultural opinion may have changed. Such is the nature of opinions. They are easily swayed and usually based on only a few references that a person has focused on in the moment. A belief, on the other hand, is formed when we begin to develop a much larger base of reference legs, and especially reference legs about which we have strong emotion. These references give us an absolute sense of certainty about something, and again, as I've said before, these references can come in a variety of forms. Anything from our personal experiences to information we've taken from other sources, or even things we've imagined vividly. People with beliefs have such a strong level of certainty that they are often closed off to new input. But if you have rapport in communicating with them, it's possible to interrupt their pattern of closing off and get them to question their references so they begin to allow for new input. Well, there we go. There's a big idea right there. If you can build rapport, if you can build a good relationship with somebody, then it's possible to interrupt their pattern. A conviction, however, eclipses a belief, primarily because of the emotional intensity a person linked to an idea. A person, because of the emotional intensity a person links to an idea, A person holding a conviction does not only feel certain, but gets angry if their conviction is even questioned. A person with a conviction is unwilling to ever question their references even for a moment. They are totally resistant to new input, often to the point of obsession. For example, zealots through the ages have held the conviction that their view of God is the only correct one, and they will even kill to maintain those beliefs. The conviction of true believers has also been exploited by would-be saviors cloaking their murderous intent under holy guises. It's what caused that group of people living in Guyana to poison their own children and then themselves by drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid at the direction of the messianic madman Jim Jones. Of course, fervent conviction is not the exclusive property of fanatics. It belongs to anyone with a high enough degree of commitment and dedication to an idea, principle, or cause. For example, someone who disagrees strongly with the practice of underground nuclear testing has a belief, but someone who takes an action, even an action others do not appreciate or approve, such as demonstrating in a protest march at the facility, has a conviction. Someone who bewails the state of public education has a belief, but someone who actually volunteers in a literacy program to try to make a difference has a conviction. Someone who fantasizes about owning an ice hockey team has an opinion about their desire, but someone who does whatever it takes to gather the necessary resources to buy a franchise has a conviction. What's the difference? Clearly, it's in the actions that one is willing to take. In fact, someone with a conviction is so passionate about their belief that they're even willing to risk rejection or make a fool of themselves for the sake of their conviction. Let's pause right there and reflect on this idea. What's interesting right here is that the difference between a belief and a conviction. We like to think that, okay, well, he put them into multiple tiers. A conviction is something much more powerful. And we like to think that a conviction is like someone has so much conviction that there's nothing that can change their belief. There's nothing that, there's absolutely nothing that can move them, that they're absolutely, that they're a zealot, but they're not necessarily zealots or zealots. They could be, but it could be as simple as someone who's willing to take the time to go volunteer, to go help. Someone who's willing to take the time to go take a very big action to help support a cause that they believe in, versus someone who believes it's a good cause is just going to just say stuff about it or just share a belief about it. So you can tell right now how weak a belief can be, how weak those references can be. I mean, you've still got strong references for beliefs, but you don't have conviction, and there's a big difference there. Probably the single biggest factor separating belief and conviction, though, is that a conviction has usually been triggered by significant emotional events during which the brain links up. Wow, okay, so significant emotional events right there. Unless I believe this, I will suffer massive pain. If I were to change this belief, then I would be giving up my entire identity, everything my life has stood for years. Holding the conviction thus becomes crucial to the person's very survival. This can be dangerous because anytime we're not willing to even look or consider the possibility that our beliefs are inaccurate, we trap ourselves in rigidity, which could ultimately condemn us to long-term failure. Sometimes it may be more appropriate to have a belief about something rather than a conviction. On the positive side, convictions by the passion they inspire in us can be empowering because they compel us to act. According to Dr. Robert P. Abelson, professor of psychology and political science at Yale University, beliefs are like possessions and convictions are simply more valued possessions which allow an individual to passionately work toward either large-scale or individual completion of goals, projects, wishes, and desires. Often, the best thing you can do to create mastery in any area of your life is to raise a belief to the level of conviction. Remember, conviction has the power to drive you to action, to push you through all kinds of obstacles. Beliefs can do this as well, but some areas of your life may require the added emotional intensity of conviction. For example, the conviction to never let yourself become overweight will compel you to make consistently healthy lifestyle choices, allowing you to get more enjoyment out of your life, and perhaps even saving you from a heart attack. The conviction that you are an intelligent person who can always find a way to turn things around can help you steer through some of the toughest times in your life. So how can you create a conviction? Start with the basic belief. Or how can you create a conviction? 1. Start with the basic belief. 2. Reinforce your belief by adding new and more powerful references. For example, let's say you've decided to never to eat meat again. To strengthen your resolve, talk to people who've chosen a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle. What reasons prompted them to change their diet, and what have been the consequences on their health and in other areas of their lives? In addition, begin to study the physiological impact that animal protein has. The more references you develop and the more emotional the references are, the stronger your conviction will become. 3. Then find a triggering event, or else create one of your own. Associate yourself fully by asking, what will cost me if I don't? What will it cost me if I don't? Ask questions that create emotional intensity for you. For example, if you want to develop a conviction never to abuse drugs, make the painful consequences of drugs abuse feel real to you by viewing films, or better yet, visiting a shelter to see firsthand the devastation wrought by drug abuse. If you vow to give up smoking, visit the intensive care wing of a hospital to observe emphysema patients confined to oxygen vents, or view an x-ray of a smoker's black lungs. These kinds of experiences have the power to push you over the edge and establish true conviction. Finally, take action. Each action you take strengthens your commitment and raises the level of your emotional intensity and conviction. That's wow. Okay. So let's start with a belief, add references, find a triggering event, and then take action. Okay. One of the challenges with convictions is that they're often based on other people's enthusiasm for your beliefs. So often people believe something because everybody else believes it. This is known in psychology as social proof, but social proof is not always accurate. When people are not sure what to do, they look to others for guidance. Robert Cialdini's book Influence, he describes a classic experiment in which someone yells rape for a subject's benefit while two people, psychological plants, ignore the cries for help and keep walking. The subject doesn't know whether to respond to the pleas or not. But when he sees the other two people act as if nothing is wrong, he decides that the cries for help are insignificant and to ignore them also. Using social... Let's pause there. Isn't that crazy? You know, we've heard of the bystander effect, and this is really nothing new if you've heard about the bystander effect. But can you believe that someone who's yelled at, that no one really even looks to help? I mean, it makes me wonder in that situation, what was actually going on? Did it look fake? Was it real? Where was it? Could they get in a building? And, you know, the thoughts, but yeah, wouldn't that make anyone be curious? Or at least, like, wonder how they can help somebody? Using social proof is a great way to limit your life, to make it just like everybody else's. Some of the strongest social proof that people use is information that they get from experts. But are experts always right? Think about our healers throughout the years. It wasn't that long ago that the most up-to-date doctors believed absolutely in the curative properties of leeches. And in our own generation, doctors gave pregnant women a soothing-sounding medication for morning sickness, Bendectin, which sounds like benediction, which turned out to be linked to birth defects. Of course, these doctors were prescribing this drug because the drug companies, pharmaceutical experts, gave them certainty that this was the finest drug available. What's the lesson? Trusting experts blindly is not well advised. Don't blindly accept everything I say either. The book says, or I say. So don't blindly accept these things. Consider things in the context of your own life. Does it make sense for you? Sometimes even the evidence of your senses can't be trusted, as the story of Copernicus illustrates. In the days of this seminal Polish astronomer, everyone knew that the sun moved around the earth. See, the sun has moved across the sky. Obviously, the earth is the center of the universe. But in 1543, Copernicus developed the first accurate model of our sun-based solar system. He, like other giants through the ages, had the courage to challenge the wisdom of the experts. And eventually the truth of his theories gained acceptance in the general populace, although not during his lifetime. My goodness. Alright, so pain is the ultimate tool for shifting a belief. Again, pain is still the most powerful way to change a belief. A great illustration of the power of changed beliefs occurred on the Sally Jesse Raphael show, when a brave woman stood before a studio and world audience to renounce her alliance with the Ku Klux Klan. Holy crap, she was renouncing her alliance. Ironically, she had been on the same show only a month before, participating in a panel of KKK women railing against all who didn't share their convictions about race, angrily shouting that racial mixing, educationally, economically, or socially, would be the downfall of the country and its people. What made her beliefs change so drastically? 3 things. First, a young woman in the audience during the original show had stood up crying and pleaded for understanding. Her husband and child were Hispanic, and she sobbed that she couldn't believe a group of people could be so hateful. Second, flying home, she yelled at her son, who had appeared with her yet didn't share her views, for embarrassing her on national television. The rest of the women chastised him for being disrespectful and quoted him from the Bible, "Thou shalt honor thy mother and father." Her 16-year-old son responded by saying that God certainly didn't intend for him to respect the evil she was espousing, and he immediately got off the plane in Dallas, vowing never to come home again. As the woman continued her flight home, her mind raced over the day's events and also began to think about the war that her country was fighting in the Middle East. She remembered that another member of the audience had said to her that day, "Young men and women of color are over there fighting, not only for themselves, but also for you." She thought about her son, how much she loved him, and how spiteful she had been with him. Would she allow that brief exchange of words to be their last? Even the thought of it was too painful for her to bear. She had to make a change immediately. As a result of this experience, she told the audience she received a message from God, which she heeded immediately: to quit the Klan and to begin to love all people equally as her brothers and sisters. Certainly, she will miss her friends. She'll be ostracized by the group. But she says that her soul is now cleansed and that she will begin her life anew with a clear conscience. It's vital to examine our beliefs and their consequences to make sure that they are empowering us. How do you know what beliefs to adopt? The answer is to find someone who's producing the results you truly want in your life. These people are the role models who can give you some of the answers you seek. Invariably, behind all successful people lies a specific set of empowering beliefs. The way to expand our lives is to model the lives of those who are already succeeding. It's powerful, it's fun, and these people are available all around you. It's just a matter of asking questions. What do you believe makes you different? What are the beliefs you have that separate you from others? Years ago, I read a book called Meetings with Remarkable Men and used that as a theme to shape my life. Since then, I've become a hunter of excellence, constantly seeking out the leading men and women in our culture to discover their beliefs, values, and strategies for achieving success. 2 years ago, I developed Power Talk, my monthly audio magazine in which I interview these giants. In fact, many of the key distinctions I'm sharing with you in this book were made as a result of interviews with some of these people who are the finest in their particular areas of endeavor. By having a commitment to share these interviews, my newest thoughts, and a summary of a national best-selling book with you each month, I've developed a consistent plan not only for empowering other people, but for constantly improving myself as well. I'll be happy to help you in your modeling of successful people through my program, but remember, you're not limited to me. The models that you need are surrounding you every single day. And here's a quote to wrap up this reading. What we are, what we think, all that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make our world the Buddha. We are what we think. Everything that comes up, everything that we see, everything that arises with our thoughts. All that we are arises. All that we are comes with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. That's a great quote right there. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Holy moly. Great read so far. So many great ideas. And already, I mean, this book started with just simply making a decision that you need, to understanding the pain and pleasure principle, to finally these specific action steps to literally transform our beliefs, because that is the core of everything. So, wonderful read so far. Stay tuned for more in the future, and thank you for tuning in.